I want to start by thanking Richard and Barbara Franke, who endowed the Franke Program, that have made events like this possible. I'm actually delighted that we are recording this because, as you all know, this is part of a new Franke Program contest and competition that we have announced called Eureka. And we are absolutely delighted to have Zuberoa, who is an award-winning producer and director with a doctorate in molecular biology. So she's a scientist by training, but had a real passion for capturing extraordinary stories that share the complexity of the natural world and the latest scientific advances. And she wanted to bring it to global audiences. So she's very, very accomplished documentary filmmaker. She started her professional career in filmmaking and storytelling via film, visually, in 2005. And her talents have been quickly recognized by top broadcasters, these international production companies and media agencies. She has created many very successful documentaries and shows for TV, short films, docuseries, and content platforms. And the reach of her work is over 1 billion viewers. So she really has enormous reach, enormous influence and impact. And she is a recipient. I just don't have the time because I'm really curious to hear what she has to tell us about storytelling. But she's the recipient of over 30 international awards, including the Bronze World Medal at the New York Festivals of TV and Film, as well as many accolades for the innovative visual effects that she incorporates into her cinematography, including AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality videos and experiences. She has worked on interactive websites, on educational apps for the iPad to enrich experiences for the audience. And her clients are numerous. They include Yahoo, Dentsu, Vodafone, BBVA, RTV, and El País, and many other media platforms. She holds a PhD in molecular biology from the University of Navarra in Spain and a master's degree in communications and film from Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona. And her education and years of experience, both being a scientist working in the lab, experiencing what it means to do science, and how to communicate the exciting discoveries that are made in the lab, that really enables her to bring a unique and very authentic experience and perspective to storytelling. And this has allowed her to become a real master, compelling teller of stories. And we are really honored to have her not just give us some tips and tricks, but help us learn about what it really takes to tell a compelling story. And this is something that is going to be of great use. So although the audience today looks very slim, I wanted to reassure her and all of you that we had tens and tens of people get to us asking if this would be videotaped. So because of the weather today, I think most people have decided that they're going to watch this later on from the recording. And before we move on to today's event, I just wanted to announce a couple of upcoming events because we have a very busy week next week. We have a distinguished lecturer. We have the senior editor of The Atlantic magazine, Ross Anderson, who's going to be visiting and speaking on Monday, February 24th. And then we have on Wednesday, we have mathematician and novelist Zia Haider Rahman, with whom I will be having a conversation on stage on Wednesday evening, February 26th. And then part of the Mapping as Knowing lecture series at the end of March, we have a musicologist, a mapper of music, Victor Coelho, who will be speaking. And we have a distinguished lecturer event, Susan Hockfield, the former president of MIT and former provost of Yale, on April 13th. So we just have a whole bunch of exciting events coming up. And most importantly, as part of this Eureka contest, Zuberoa Dr. Marcos has really agreed, and it's an honor that she's part of our jury for this contest, which is now open. We had a lot of interest and excitement, so originally we were going to open it only to the Yale community, staff, students, and faculty, but Yale alumni wanted in. So the contest is now actually totally open to the public, and anyone who can send a video clip that is less than 2 minutes explaining a scientific concept in a very unique way without using mathematics or jargon is welcome to submit. And so our distinguished jury will do the selection, and we'll have a final screening on April 21st. So mark your calendars. So it is my utter pleasure to invite Zuberoa to come and tell us more about how to tell a compelling story, and in particular a compelling story that involves science, discoveries in science, and the process of doing science. Thank you so much for coming. Really delighted.
So, Priya, thank you so much for the invitation. For me, it's always a pleasure to participate in any initiative that put together science with the humanities. So, thank you. And I also thank you to the ones that made it here, despite the rain and the weather. So, before I start, I would love to get a sense who I'm speaking to. So, what's the audience here? Are you scientists? Are you filmmakers? Are you researchers? Who are you? We're a small audience. Actually, I love that. So who are you? Who is a scientist? Okay. And the ones that are not scientists?
I'm a journalist and a documentary maker.
Oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to teach you anything that you don't know already.
I have all this time in the world.
Okay, great.
I'm an architect.
You're an architect, okay, wonderful. And the scientists, in which field are you working?
I'm in psychology.
Psychologist, okay, great.
Astrophysics.
Wow, astrophysics, wonderful. So, one thing, at the end of this conversation, I will share with Priya a document, or is the same document that I have now in my hands, that has everything that I'm going to explain here, everything. And it's way more detailed than I'm gonna say. So you don't have to take notes. Actually, I will prefer if, for me it's more important that, especially because it's a small group and it's really easy to interact, if you ask me questions. I know that there is a special Q&A time at the end of the talk, but for me it's more important, and I welcome you and encourage you actually to ask me questions through the presentation. I'm more interested in answering your questions than in going through all my slides, okay? So please feel free to interrupt me and ask me questions. So the goal of this small talk is to walk you through what I have learned over the past 15 years producing different kind of multimedia products, from films to short films to series, etc. So when we talk about science communication, also called popularization, what we mean is it's an effort to reduce the distance that exists between science and the common knowledge. And in order to do that, what usually we have to do is to take that scientific knowledge and transform it in a way that is more aligned to how people understand things. The reason we have to do that is, and this is also painful for me, is because for most of the people, science is not among the most interesting things. So we have to make it appealing in some ways. And in order to do that, there are some techniques and there are some resources that I'm going to explain today that actually, if we use them, it can help us overcoming that distance and closing that gap. A basic rule, not only for science communication, but for any kind of communication, is know who your audience is. And respect your audience, take care of your audience. That's critical. That means communicate with them, don't teach them. It's very easy, especially when you are doing science communication, to give a lecture. The same thing that you give in a class, to give it on a film. And actually, when people sit in the living room to watch a documentary or a film, they want to be entertained. So that's something that you always have to keep in mind when you are thinking on creating something multimedia. Communicate with people, don't teach them. The next thing is be very respectful with feelings. And also this is particularly important in science because there are topics that people are afraid of. Think, for example, on CRISPR. CRISPR is this technique that allows us to engineer genes and with that to play with life. So instead of putting yourself in a position of, I'm a scientist, trust me, actually embrace that. I mean, show respect towards the people that are watching you by acknowledging that actually that topic is dangerous, okay? And the third thing is never forget, and we are going to go back to this over the talk several times, never forget the human element. So in science usually, the scientific method separates the scientists as individuals from the research. In communication, the human element is the most important thing. Not just because scientists are, at the end, humans, but also because the connection between people happens at an emotional level. You are not going to connect with a person through facts. It's really hard to do that. But you are going to connect through the emotions. So you have to always keep in mind that human connection. And every single time that you are going to tell a story about science, try to find something that resonates with the soul of your audience. That's really critical. And again, this applies to every single way of communication, whether it's science or not science. I'm going to focus on the work that I've done myself. I started my career doing broadcast TV. Then I switched into digital, and I have done digital TV and series for different digital media outlets. So TV, theater, mobile devices, anything there is video, it has its own characteristics. And the main thing is, now this has changed a little bit, but TV has always been a one-pass medium. That means that you could not, when you sat in your living room and you were watching a documentary, you could not just stop, think what you just saw, and then continue. Now this has changed, especially with the streaming platforms. Now with Netflix, with Amazon Prime, with YouTube, we can do actually that. But that's something that is still a major characteristic of television or video, and it has to be, I mean, you have to think about that. The other thing is the way TV communicates things is radically different to science. In TV, we love using narratives that are poetic and that are dramatic. If you think of science, science is always very intellectual, it's very theoretical, it's a way, I mean, it loves explaining things in a very organized, structured way. TV is just the opposite. And the reason for that is because at the end, as I already said, what we want is to build a human connection. And in order to do that, we need to rebuild the stories. So that's another main characteristic of TV. And the last one that I will say is, it's a medium that is not good to convey a lot of information. So every single time that you want to tell something through a video, actually you are not going to be able to explain more than one or two ideas. So actually it's really important to choose before you start even shooting, and we will go further into this, what is what you are going to tell. So every single film that you do needs a storyline. So the storyline is the plot, and is basically what holds your audience interested and keeps them interested through the length of your production until the end. So the storyline of a documentary, for example, is something that is decided early on in the production process, and usually defines the whole production, and especially the content that is going to be included in that production, because everything that is not aligned with that storyline usually is going to be left aside. Obviously, in order to build a storyline, well, there are different type of storylines. There are series that I'm sorry because that is too small and I think you cannot even read what is written there. So no worries, I will tell you that. So there are different type of storylines. There are multi-episodic series that have a common storyline. For example, think of the wildlife films. Some of them, they tackle how life evolved on planet Earth, or the different species that lives on planet Earth. Some of those series, each episode has its own storyline. Think of, we are going to devote an episode to Antarctica. Think of a series that wants to explain the most representative animals that live in each continent. So we have a main storyline, each episode has its own storyline, and then within each episode we can find also smaller storylines. That is what we call sequences. Imagine that we are again working on a film about the species in Antarctica and we want to shoot a whale that lives in Antarctica. So that and the particular behavior of a whale that lives in Antarctica. So that will be a specific storyline. So we have different types of storylines, and depending on the production that we are working on, if we are doing a 2-3 minutes long video as the ones for the Eureka film competition, usually we will choose just one storyline. If we are working in something bigger, probably we will have to deal with different storylines at different levels. Obviously, in order to build a storyline, the first thing is to decide what we are going to talk about, right? What is the story that we are going to tell? And one of the main mistakes is to mix a topic with a story. What's a topic and what's a story? So let's imagine that we want to create a film that explains time travel through wormholes. Or we want to create a film that explains the revival of extinct species through genetic engineering. Okay? Those will be topics. A topic to be a story, it needs a plot. So the two topics that I just mentioned to you are actually the topics behind two major scientific movies. Do you recognize them, right?
Yes.
Okay. So Interstellar, I chose these movies on purpose because I thought that almost all or everyone, knows them. So Interstellar is about that. It's about time travel through a wormhole, right? And Jurassic Park is about genetic engineering and how to bring back to life species that don't exist anymore. So how did the producers and the director turn that topic into a story? In the case of Interstellar, the story is at a time where life on Earth is under threat. There is this group of astronauts that leave everything behind and travel through a wormhole near Saturn, trying to find a new home. That's the story. In the case of Jurassic Park, what the story is what happens with an amusement park full of cloned animals collapses. It shows the dangers of messing up with Mother Nature, right? So the common thing of the stories, all the stories have three things together. They have characters, they have a conflict, and they have timeliness. If we go back again to Interstellar, the characters are the group of astronauts. The conflict is life on Earth has become extremely difficult, so we need to find another place, and we need to find that place before we all die, right? And the timeliness is the same thing, right? So when you are looking for a story, look for a story that has characters, that has timeliness, and that has a conflict. I know this is easier said than done. So how can you, a way of figuring out when you think about an idea, for example, for the Eureka Film Festival, to figure out if you have a topic or you have a story, you can ask yourself these 5 questions. So, can I communicate it in a single sentence consisting of nouns? What I said, time travel through wormholes to different worlds. That's a topic. Is it time sensitive? Then definitely it's going to be a story. Does it contain characters that are easy to identify? Definitely it's going to be a story. Can I pinpoint the conflict? Again, it's going to be a story. It's heavy on themes, in short, in details. What do you think you're going to be? If something is heavy on themes, short in details, it's going to be a topic. Right? So asking yourself these questions actually is going to help you figure out if what you have is a topic or it's a story. The next thing will be, okay, how do I know once I have a story if it is a good story? Because that's also critical when you are working on a film or on a movie or whatever. So what I will suggest is think of if you will feel compelled to tell that story to a group of friends, having a drink or enjoying a barbecue. If you feel compelled to do that and be provocative and at the same time be factual, I mean to stick to the facts but at the same time try to simplify it, then you have a story. If not, probably it's not a good story. I mean, if not, maybe it's not the best one. But you can also ask yourself questions to test how good is your story. And for me, the most important one is, does the story challenge what we know about that topic? That means, in other words, is that story surprising in any way? Surprise is one of the most powerful ways of attract people's attention. So if you have something surprising, if you have something intriguing, that's definitely a really good story. Why should viewers care about this? This is a good one, because when we are thinking about the stories, we are biased. We usually think about the stories on topics or on subjects that are interesting for us. But something that is interesting for us is not necessarily interesting for other people. So a good way of testing this is, again, and I know this is not very scientific, but going back to your friends or to relatives and actually share your idea with them and see what your response. You don't have to even ask them to tell you something with words. Even their reaction, their gestures, is going to tell you if that's a good story or it's not. And the last question is, why is this story important and why is it important now? So asking yourself these questions will help you figure out if you have a really good story. Once you have the story, then you have to do the research. And basically, the goal of the research is to learn as much as you can about that topic. Depending on the production that you are doing, this period of time can take a few days, can take weeks, it can take even months or even years of doing the research. And basically, it's in this stage where you are going to put your reporter hat on, and you are going to start reading papers, gathering facts, figuring out who are the main players in the field, making calls, trying to get all the leads and facts you can about the subject of your story. So my recommendation is, when you are doing your research, to write down the main ideas that you find, because that will help you then put them in a sequence and actually build your storyline. Once you have done the research, another important element is to make a shot list. Think of the shot list as the ingredients that you need in order to make your film, right? So when you are thinking on the shot list, there are several things that you have to keep in mind. The first one is, do you have pre-existing footage or images, photos, that are going to help you tell your story? Yes or no? Do you have to shoot everything yourself, brand new? That's the main thing. That's a very important thing, actually, when planning a production. Another one is, do you know who are your primary characters? Do you know the people that you are going to interview? Do you know the people that are going to be in your film? The landmarks. Landmarks are essential in any film. Think about the places that you want to visit and you want to shoot. In every film, there will be places that have a strong connection with the characters in the film or with the subject in the film. So if you can go to any of those places, that's a very powerful way of building something that is deep and that is engaging. Then think about the activities that you need to shoot. So let's think that we are making a film about a marine biologist that is studying a group of whales, going back to the same example that we used before. So I need to go to Antarctica to film those whales because they only live there. So when planning on the activities to film for that movie, you could include the preparations to go to Antarctica, the trip to Antarctica. Then they need to prepare the boat. They need to approach the whales in a way that doesn't disturb the whales. They need to prepare the materials. I mean, some of the behaviors in the animal world, you can only see them from above. So now we have, for example, tools like drones that allow us to get really beautiful footage from the sky. So you could shoot the scientists working on preparing that. Then how they quickly respond when suddenly the whales appear and they start behaving and doing whatever thing it is. And obviously at the end you will have also the footage, actually what you want to do, the behavior that you want to shoot. So plan all the activities, don't just focus on the outcome. I think one of the main mistakes that we make is we show science as something that happens by magic. One of the main mistakes that we make is that we show science as something that happens by magic. And any person that works in science, in a lab, knows that actually science is a process, and it's a process with many ups and downs. So actually is in that process when you are going to find also the more emotional elements of the story and the ones that are going to help you build that connection with your audience. So definitely don't forget about them. And the last one is, are you filming something that involves an activity with a specific timeline? So are you filming an eclipse, let's say, and that eclipse is going to happen at a specific date and time? Or are you filming something that is not time sensitive and then you can recreate that? For example, you are filming something that's a picture of a documentary that I did about Roman engineering. I mean, we had to build from scratch the Roman wall, the ancient wall. So we have to design from scratch the whole thing. So thinking about all those elements, it's really important. So once you have done all your research, you are the super expert in your subject, and you have a very detailed shot list of what do you need to make your movie, is the time to start thinking on the script and the structure of the script. Most science documentaries are unscripted. And then people ask, and how do you make something that is unscripted? All the research that you do usually serves you as a guideline to plan the story and to plan the different shots. And you let the final story emerge as you film. That said, there are like two main schools here. So there are filmmakers that love to use all the information that they gather during the research to create like a preliminary treatment or a script, and then they go out there and they start filming, and then in the editing room they update that script with the real footage. And then there are other set of filmmakers that actually gather the information, get a deep understanding of the subject, they assemble the crews and they go out and they start filming, and at the end of the day they will review all the footage, they will select the most powerful clips, and they will start assembling them and building the story, letting the story emerge. None of them is better or worse. I mean, I know producers and filmmakers that operate both ways. I think it's more a personal decision than something that is bad or good, right or wrong. But when you are building the script, in order to give your story a good structure, there are several guidelines that is good to follow. I will say to focus on the opening. The opening is the most critical part of your film, because it's when your audience is going to decide if they are going to keep with you or they are going to move on to another thing. And that decision is going to happen in few seconds. So in the opening, you have to choose something that is really compelling. And it can be compelling because, as we said, it's surprising, because it's intriguing, or because it's something new. I mean, you can play with many things. Also, one of the main strengths when you are working with video is that you have the words, what people actually are saying, but you also have the footage, the image that you have, and you have the sounds. And you can play with all of them, or you can play just with some of them. I mean, music, we will see later, it's a very powerful tool to create tension, to anticipate that something is going to happen, but you don't know what, and to keep people engaged in a story. Another tip is when you are writing the script, put yourself in the mind of the viewer. I mean, by the time you are writing the script, you are an expert in the subject. So even if you choose to put an idea on in the script and leave something out, for you it's very easy to fill in the gaps because you already know everything. But your audience doesn't, because they haven't done that research. So for me, one of the most critical things is when you are writing the script and you decide to leave something out or include something in, think about if that's really essential for the story. I mean, if I leave this in, will help people that have no idea about what I'm talking about follow the story, or they will get lost. If it's something essential, definitely keep it in. If it's not essential, take it out. Because TV, video, as I said, is not a medium that allows a lot of information. So try to keep like the most important ideas in, the ones that your audience needs to follow the story. And that is connected to the next one. Don't try to explain anything. I mean, there is a paradox at the heart of science communication, and is, regardless of the medium, and is you want to give an accurate view of reality, and at the same time, you want to be engaging. So if you, and at the same time, I will add, you have a limited amount of time, or you have a limited amount of words if you are writing a story for a magazine or a newspaper. So the most important task is what you leave in the story and what you take out of the story. And the hard part is there's no algorithm, there's no rule that is going to help you figure out that. I mean, you have to develop what I call mind reading abilities, or another a good criteria to follow is choose the ideas and plan your storyline as if you knew nothing about a subject. What would you love to hear and to see in a movie about a subject you have no idea about? If you follow that criteria, it will help you also figuring out what to keep in, what to keep out. And the last one is don't underestimate your public. Don't think that your audience is stupid. I mean, actually, there are many topics in science that are complex. If we are talking about quantum physics, it's extremely complex. So just embrace the complexity. I mean, not everybody is going to understand everything that you say, and actually it's fine. Because if everybody understands everything, probably what it means is that you have simplified the content way too much. One of the main ideas of science communication is it's more important to ignite curiosity in people and to help people ask questions and leave them with questions so they can, after your movie or your documentary or whatever you are producing, I mean, help them go and get more information about that than to give them all the answers about everything. So a few indications about the style on the script. We mentioned that already. Stories are about people. So we are very used to read headlines like a study found that exercising 3 times per week lowers the risk of several types of cancer. That's pretty common. Actually, it's a wrong statement because studies don't find anything. People do science, people run experiments, it's people the ones who actually do science. So again, give the core of your story to people. Also, because depending on the topic you choose, people maybe, your audience may not be interested in that topic. But if you put the focus in the people, let's frame it this way. The way of keeping your audience engaged in a topic is by making them care about the people that care about that topic. If you are doing a story about the mantis shrimp, there is an amazing animal in the ocean who has amazing properties. But you will say, I'm not interested at all about the mantis shrimp. But you have very compelling characters. People will watch that movie. So even with a not very attractive subject, if you have compelling characters, people will watch your story. So definitely focus on the stories, on the people. Conflict and suspense, those are very powerful strategies to keep people engaged. Not always is easy to find conflict in science. In wildlife films, it's easy. I mean, a common way of finding conflict is fights between a predator and a prey. We have all of them seen that kind of conflict. In some other subjects, it's trickier. But many times you can find that conflict in the process. Again, let's show the process of making science, because there you will find the struggles and I don't know, maybe the fights between different teams for being the first one to discover something. So there you have the conflict. And suspense, also, it's a very powerful, as we said, tool to actually generate interest, because it anticipates something that you really don't know. And in the case of TV, music is a very powerful way of generating that sense of suspense. Avoid jargon. This is a big one. I mean, scientists love inventing words to communicate efficiently between them. The truth is that those words usually work only for the people working in that field. Even scientists working in other fields don't understand those words. So common language has enough words to be able to explain any topic in a way that every single person can understand. And actually, there is a very nice book written by an astrophysicist. It's an Italian astrophysicist, and the book is called The Edge of the Sky, and it tells the story of the universe, how the universe was created. And he made a very interesting experiment. It was to explain how the universe was created using the 1,000 most used words in English language. If he could make it, anyone can make it. That said, sometimes there's no way but use jargon. If that's the case, explain the concept first and then include the word. Don't do it the other way. Don't include first the word and then explain the concept. Because until your audience understands what you mean with that word acts as a dead weight that is going to pull down your story. So first, explain what you mean and then include the word. Avoid formality. Science is also a very formal, the scientific language is also very formal, and it's very structured, and it's very standardized, but it drains passion. It's really hard to get passionate when you are reading a scientific paper, right? And when we are producing a film or when we are producing a documentary, what we really want is the audience to experience anger, to experience fear, to experience all the possible emotions that humans can experience. So avoid formality to do that. And connected to that, don't use the passive voice. It's also very common to find stories, papers in science that use the passive voice. That also drains the passion. Use the active voice. That doesn't mean that you have to speak in first person, I. That's actually not good to do unless you have a very powerful host. If you narrate something in the first person, you are putting yourself out there, like the most important part of that scientific story. Actually, it's way better to use the third person and let the science be the main, let's say, character of your story. Okay, so those are a few tips that I wanted to share with you. I don't know how much time left we have. I would love to hear your questions about it, if you have any. Is any of you going to film a movie for the Eureka Film Competition? You are still thinking about it? Yeah.
2 minutes? That's my question.
2 minutes.
How do you do that in 2 minutes? In 2 minutes, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have a character with a conflict and a resolution, essentially, in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do it.
No, you can do it. That's my question.
It's possible. For example, you have to choose well your topic. It has to be something very specific. Obviously you cannot, you can make a 2-minute video and without no interviews to any people. You can interview them to gather information, but you cannot include, you don't have to include any of them in your video. If you include some of them, I would recommend just include one. I mean, one of the riskiest things when you are doing the research is you can feel very tempted to create a very long wish list of people you would love to talk to. And that's perfectly fine. You can talk with as many people as you want. But the thing is that for the audience, it's really hard to get to know characters. So even if in a movie, in a feature film, and we are talking about maybe a 1 hour and a half, 2 hour long movie, more than 7 or 8 characters is too much. If we are talking about a documentary, usually 4 or 5 is the limit. I mean, the shorter the video, I mean, just 1. And something also very important that I didn't mention, talking about the experts. Something that I have to deal every time, in every production. When I reach out to a scientist, every time that I contact a scientist asking them, okay, I'm working on this film or I'm working on this video and I need a person to talk to me about X. They always tell you, oh, I'm going to introduce you to this person that is the person that knows the most about the topic. And it's like, actually, I don't need the person that knows the most. I need the person that is able to communicate that subject in an accessible way. I mean, the amount of information, again, that you can share on a 2-minute video or a 1 hour long documentary is not that much. So you don't need the person that knows tons about black holes or about CRISPR. You need a person that knows how to identify the ideas that are key and to communicate them in a way that is very plain, that is simple, so can people understand them. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. One of the mistakes that I noticed is the use of formulas.
Yeah.
However, sometimes you need to use numbers. And my question to you is, how many digits would you use? Let's say 52.534.
My recommendation would be don't use formulas. Yes. And don't use numbers. But if you have to use numbers, don't use digits. Just, I mean, if you, don't use digits. Just make it simple. Just make it simple. I mean, you have to give information that has to be grasped in a second. I mean, when you are, it's a tricky thing because every time that you are explaining science, and I talk about that, there is this paradox at the heart of science communication. You want to be accurate, but at the same time, you cannot explain everything because you will run out of time and you will, I mean, people will get lost and no one will watch what you are producing. And many scientists, I have found many scientists who disagree with this process of simplification because they think that you are distorting reality. But I always love to mention actually something that Carl Zimmer said once, talking about the tricks he uses for his science writing, is when we are creating a film or when we are writing a story for a newspaper or when we are on a radio show, the idea is not to create a replica of reality. The idea is to create a well-made shadow of reality that ignites curiosity in people, so then people can go and can read a book or can watch more documentaries or can even meet the experts in that field of expertise if you have access to them and get a more accurate view of that reality. I don't know if that helps you. Thank you. More questions?
You had mentioned identifying your shots.
Yeah.
And then after that,
Yeah.
developing your script.
Yeah.
Which makes total sense now that you said it, but I would have thought develop your script and conceive the shots that would illustrate the script. So can you expand on that a little more? I see why kind of identifying the shots, a story can emerge out of the images. Is that more or less what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, you cannot have a detailed list of all the shots that you will need for a film, especially the longer the movie, the harder it is. You just cannot plan every single shot in a 1 hour long documentary because you don't know what is going to happen. But you need to get a list of the shots that you need in order to tell that story. I mean, I have done that mistake in the past of going out there without that list and start filming, and then you are in the editing room and you realize, oh, I will need this shot, and I didn't get it. So now you need to figure out how to tell the story without that shot. So especially with the core ideas of your documentary, I will strongly suggest creating that. And it doesn't have to be a very detailed thing. I mean, I know people that create storyboards, and the storyboards are draws. People draw what is going to be in each shot. It's impossible to do that in a documentary. It's just too long and it's unpredictable. I mean, I cannot go to you as an architect and tell you, you have to tell me exactly this. I mean, I don't know what you are going to tell. Even if I talk to you on the research process many, many times, at the end, I mean, science documentaries per se have this very unpredictable thing. So having kind of a guideline helps. That's why I always recommend to create a shot list. That said, there are people who don't do it. But usually, it's on the mind.
So before this kind of making, say, a 2-minute video, it does make sense to have a short list, right?
Yeah.
And sort of a plan.
Yeah.
Because you have a lot less time to rely on spontaneity. And
Exactly.
So it's much more structured.
Exactly.
And so I was very curious about the point that you made about conflict.
Yeah.
So what is it about is it really just engagement with the viewer that conflict is needed for that? Or is there some particular power to conflict per se because you are you're providing an answer to some question or a puzzle or a riddle or something? What is it about conflict that works?
I think it's both ways. It's both things, actually. I mean, you don't really need people fighting, but I think that one of the main powers of conflict comes from the unexpected. And yeah, it's playing with that, actually. It's quite powerful. Yeah, but I don't know how to explain it, but it's about finding, and this is also controversial, it's like to try to find the outliers in a story that help like keep the audience engaged.
It's about tension.
Yeah, it's about keeping the tension. It helps a little bit. Obviously, you cannot all the time like go for it. I mean, you have to know when to use it and when not. I mean, if you had a wildfire film all the time with conflict between predator and prey, that would be boring. I mean, you will be exhausted about it. So, but it's a good way of breaking the dynamic of a film and getting people interested again. It's like keeping the attention of people.
And in particular for Eureka, what is your advice? Is it useful to have a narrator or a narrative? Should there be a voice that kind of explains, or you think it's often more powerful just to let it be visual? What would your advice be?
It depends a lot on the story. I mean, it depends a lot on the story. If you have a compelling character I will put that character at the center of the story. If not, if you have something super powerful and a research idea that is super powerful, we found a new type of a star never seen or something like that, you don't really need a person. I mean, it depends a lot on the subject. But definitely I will plan it because it's just 2 minutes. So you have to have a very clear idea of what you want to tell and how you want to tell it. And actually 2 minutes is a lot of time. It can be a lot of time. It doesn't look like it, but it's a lot of time. I mean, you can explain. I mean, one of the shows that I did once was explaining scientific, it was kind of a new show about science, and we have to explain a scientific news every day in 1 minute. We only had 1 minute, and that story was included in the main newscast, and we only had 1 minute, so we had to explain it in 1 minute. And actually, it's challenging, but it can be done. Yeah.
So as you're talking, I'm kind of trying to think of topics and thinking of all of these shots I would like to have maybe. And they involve a whole load of maybe animations that I have no idea how to make.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for maybe like working within what is more realistic? Because I'm not going to Antarctica to shoot whales. I don't have, the time or the money, right? So how to kind of keep more down to earth and maximize what you have, especially in terms of either getting live footage or making animations. And also secondly, do you have any advice for maybe making animations? Are there good tools out there or anything like that?
Making an animation is really hard. And it's a common element in science documentaries, animations. I have always worked with graphic designers to create animations. It's really hard otherwise to, there is a technique that in the last few years it has become more and more common. And it's about, have you seen these videos where there is a person writing on a whiteboard?
Yes.
And the whole video is, a person that usually draws very, very well and has like a very beautiful letter, and they hand draw whatever scientific idea you want to explain. That's something that if you know how to draw, you could do it. Otherwise, it takes a lot of time. Every time that I have to explain a scientific concept, what I usually do is I draw myself what I want to do, and then I share that with an animator and a graphic designer that are the ones that create that on a computer. And actually, it's also a very expensive process. So that's why, on purpose, I didn't include it. But also it depends on the subject. Maybe you can become like super creative and find a way to explain that idea with some metaphors. Something that is also very powerful in science communication is metaphors, because usually they work by reducing the dimension of something into a scale that it's easier for people to understand. So, for example, a very common one is when you explain the whole history of life on Earth as it was a process that happened during 1 calendar year, and then I'm sure you have seen this at some documentary, and then you realize that in 1 calendar year, humans will appear on the surface of Earth December 31st, a few minutes before the end of the year. So those kind of things can help. And other techniques that can help too, but it's actually trickier, is to work with stop motion. Stop motion is a technique where basically what you are doing is you are taking shots, pictures of something. So you create a set, you take a picture. You change tiny thing, you take another picture. You take another tiny thing, you take another picture. And then in the editing room, you put all of it together. And then that becomes some film. So that's something that you could do too, but that requires higher skills. So basically, it depends a lot on the. You could create something if you are a person that knows how to create things. If you are skilled enough to build something, you could also do that. I mean, I don't know any, but I can check. I don't know any software that you could use to create like super simple animations. I know very complex ones that I'm not even me knows how to use them. Yes?
If the Powers of 10
Yes.
movie was submitted to Eureka, how do you think that would do?
Say it again?
Powers of 10, Ray.
I have not seen that movie.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I have not seen that movie.
It's the Charles and Ray Eames production
Okay.
of a sense of scale. So you have a couple sitting on the shore of Chicago, and then they zoom out and you go to space, and then they zoom back into the atom, and it's
Okay.
done in 3 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
It's one of the most powerful. I mean, that was the inspiration for this contest.
Oh, it was.
Yes.
I
I
guess
showed
they would
it
do
in my
well.
class. Yeah, I
Yes,
showed
they
it in
would
my
do well.
class, and I think we just touched on that, right? And that is sort of very simple. It's like many different shots that are just concatenated. Right? So,
Yeah.
and sort of you have a break. You see, they say, oh, we're zooming in by a factor of 2. So there's cut, right?
And it kind of narrates
Yeah.
as it goes.
And that was one reason I asked the question about, so I think the narration can actually do a lot of clever things.
Yeah.
The cleverness can be in the narration, and the graphic part can be simpler.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with when you are producing something that is video format, you have all these elements that you can play with. It's not just the narration, it's the image, what actually you are seeing, is the sound. And actually, I mean, the combination of all of them can actually help without you having to create something on a computer to explain an idea. I mean, also, one of the problems that I have faced many times is that when you are writing a piece for a newspaper and you create one of these amazing infographics, you kind of stop and really look at it and understand it. When you are creating a documentary, again, it's something that goes quickly. So the infographic has to be clear enough so you can get it in a few seconds, and actually that makes it even trickier. So sometimes having something that overlays in the footage that you are using actually makes it even more complex to understand. So the narration and maybe the images you use and the sounds can make it work better than using a complex graphic that you create per se for something.
So you're saying that sometimes there's a virtue in using something that's static,
Yes.
even in a film, as opposed
Yes.
to dynamic. Right?
Yes. More questions? Okay, so I will share the document with Priya, and
Can you make it available publicly? Or
yeah,
with
you
that?
can make it available with anyone, and yeah, I mean, I'm super happy to do that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.